Teen girl killed, tied to Cinderblocks in creek after argument with her boyfriend. The creek was quiet that night, save for the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. A faint mist clung to the ground, weaving through the tall grass and jagged rocks along the water's edge. It was here, beneath the pale glow of a crescent moon, that a terrible secret would soon be uncovered. Earlier that evening, 16-year-old Emily had stormed out of her boyfriend Tyler's car, her cheeks flushed with anger. The argument had started over something trivial, a missed text, a lingering glance at someone else. But it had escalated quickly, Tyler's words cutting sharper than the chill in the autumn air. "I'm done with this," Emily had said, slamming the door and walking toward the woods, her silhouette swallowed by the shadows of the trees. Tyler watched her go, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Something in his gaze shifted, a flicker of rage, a dangerous calm. An hour later, the creek bore witness to a scene it would never forget. Emily's body lay lifeless in the shallow water, her hands bound with coarse rope. Cinderblocks, heavy and cold, dragged her down, their surfaces slick with algae. The current whispered against her pale skin, tugging at strands of her hair that fanned out like dark ribbons. The sound of water trickling over stones seemed louder in the stillness, almost deafening. Tyler stood on the bank, his breathing uneven, his face a mask of something between shock and fury. The moonlight caught the streaks of dirt on his hands, the scrapes on his arms from dragging the heavy blocks. He stared at the water, his eyes unblinking, as though trying to convince himself this was real. The woods around him seemed to close in, the rustling leaves now a cacophony of accusing whispers. He didn't hear the snap of a twig behind him. A jogger had taken an unusual route that night, their flashlight piercing the shadows just in time to catch a figure darting into the trees. The beam of light fell on the creek, revealing the grim reality below. The jogger froze, their breath caught in their throat, before fumbling for their phone to call the police. When the authorities arrived, Tyler was long gone, but the evidence he left behind told a chilling story. The cinderblocks, the rope, the imprints of his boots in the mud. Each detail painted a portrait of betrayal and violence. And there, in the quiet creek, Emily's life came to a haunting, unjust end. Her laughter, her dreams, her arguments, all now silenced by the ripple of water against stone. News of the discovery spread quickly, casting a dark shadow over the small, tight-knit community. Emily's friends and family were devastated, their grief amplified by the horror of how her life was stolen. Vigils were held near the creek, candles flickering in the night as tears fell silently into the earth. The question on everyone's lips was the same. How could someone who claimed to love her commit such a monstrous act? Police worked tirelessly to track Tyler, piecing together his movements on the night of the crime. Surveillance footage showed him stopping at a hardware store hours before their argument. He had purchased rope and gloves, his expression calm, almost detached. This was no crime of passion. It was calculated, cold-blooded. The woods around the creek became a hunting ground for detectives and search teams. Dogs picked up Tyler's scent, leading officers deeper into the dense forest, where abandoned trails twisted like veins. Days passed, tension mounting as Tyler evaded capture. Then, one foggy morning, a ranger found him in a remote cabin miles from town. He was disheveled, his face gaunt, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. The arrest was swift, the cuffs clinking like a final judgment as officers led him out. During questioning, Tyler's demeanor was unsettling. He showed no remorse, no emotion, as he recounted their argument. "She pushed me," he muttered, his voice flat. The investigators pressed him for details, their voices sharp, but his answers came in fragments, devoid of regret. The courtroom was packed during his trial, every seat filled with faces of anguish and fury. Emily's mother clutched a photo of her daughter, her hands trembling as the prosecution detailed the crime. The evidence was damning, each piece cutting through Tyler's feeble attempts at defense. The rope fibers matched the ones found in his car. The dirt on his boots mirrored the soil near the creek. Witnesses testified to the turbulence of their relationship, painting a grim picture of control and jealousy. When the verdict was read, guilty of first-degree murder, the room erupted in muted sobs and gasps. Emily's family embraced, their tears a mixture of sorrow and relief. But justice, while served, could never bring her back. The creek, once a place of quiet beauty, became a chilling reminder of that fateful night. Flowers were often left on its banks, their petals drifting on the water like unspoken prayers. And as time passed, Emily's story became a cautionary tale, a haunting echo in the hearts of those who remembered her. Her laughter, her light, her life, forever extinguished, yet never forgotten. The town tried to move on, but the scars of Emily's death lingered in the fabric of daily life. Her absence was felt in the smallest of ways. A desk left empty at school, a favorite song that played unexpectedly on the radio. Friends who once shared secrets and dreams with her now carried the weight of memories that felt too heavy to bear. The creek itself became a place both feared and revered. Some avoided it entirely, unable to face the darkness it symbolized. Others visited to pay their respects, leaving notes, flowers, and even locks of their hair tied to the branches of a nearby tree. They called it Emily's Tree, a quiet memorial for a life lost too soon. Over time, stories about that night morphed into local legend. Some claimed they could hear her voice in the rustling of the leaves. Others whispered of strange occurrences near the water, shadows moving where no one stood, a chill that crept over the skin like icy fingers. Teenagers, drawn by the macabre allure, dared each other to visit the spot after dark. But those who went often returned pale and shaken, speaking of an overwhelming sense of being watched. For Emily's family, the loss was a wound that never fully healed. Her mother poured her grief into advocacy, founding a nonprofit to support victims of domestic violence. She spoke at schools, churches, and community centers, sharing Emily's story as a warning and a plea. "Love is never meant to hurt," she would say, her voice trembling but resolute. "Pay attention to the signs. Protect each other. Don't let this happen to someone you love." Her efforts saved lives, though the irony of her own daughter's fate weighed heavily on her heart. As the years passed, Tyler remained behind bars, his appeals denied, his name becoming a footnote in the story of Emily's life. But in the quiet moments of his confinement, he was left alone with the ghosts of his actions. The sound of rushing water haunted his dreams, a relentless reminder of the life he destroyed. Emily's story, though tragic, became a catalyst for change in the community. Conversations about abuse, control, and the importance of healthy relationships began to surface more openly. Her legacy, painful as it was, served as a beacon for others, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could find a way to shine through. And so, in the hearts of those who knew her, Emily lived on, her memory a testament to the resilience of love and the enduring hope for justice. The town slowly transformed, shaped by the lessons Emily's story had forced it to confront. Schools began implementing programs to educate young people about the signs of toxic relationships. Counselors and advocates worked tirelessly to provide safe spaces for those in need, ensuring that no cry for help would go unheard. Emily's mother became a symbol of strength in the community, though her grief was a quiet, ever-present shadow. She often visited Emily's Tree, sitting beneath its branches with a journal in hand, writing letters to her daughter. "Today, a young girl came up to me after my talk," she wrote one afternoon. "She told me she left her abusive boyfriend last week because of your story. You saved her, Emily. You saved her." The creek, once a place of tragedy, began to feel different over time. Local artists painted murals on nearby walls, transforming the area into a vibrant tribute to Emily's memory. The largest mural depicted a girl standing by a flowing river, her hand outstretched toward the horizon. It wasn't just a symbol of loss. It was a symbol of hope, of the strength to move forward even when burdened by pain. But for those closest to Emily, moving forward was a complex and uneven journey. Her best friend, Rachel, struggled for years to find peace. Every laugh, every moment of joy came with a pang of guilt, a voice in her mind whispering, Emily should be here for this. It wasn't until Rachel began volunteering at the nonprofit Emily's mother had founded that she found a sense of purpose. Helping others navigate the pain and confusion of abusive relationships felt like honoring Emily's memory in the most meaningful way. And while the pain of her absence never truly faded, it became a reminder of the importance of connection, compassion, and courage. Years later, the town gathered by the creek for a special ceremony. A bronze plaque was unveiled near Emily's tree, engraved with her name and the words, "Asterisk in memory of Emily, whose light continues to guide us toward love, understanding, and justice. Gone, but never forgotten." Asterisk. As the sun dipped below the horizon, candles were lit, their soft glow reflecting off the water. The community stood together, a living testament to the power of remembrance and resilience. And as the candles flickered in the evening breeze, it was as if Emily's spirit was there among them, watching, smiling, and reminding them all to hold each other a little closer. Her story, though tragic, had become a force for change, ensuring that no one else would have to endure what she did. In the end, Emily's legacy wasn't just one of loss. It was one of love, a love that had the power to heal, even in the face of unimaginable pain. As the years turned into decades, Emily's story became an enduring legend in the town, passed down from generation to generation. Her memory lived on, not just through the plaque or the tree, but through the countless lives her story had touched. Survivors of abuse often credited their courage to the awareness her tragedy had sparked. Young couples were more conscious of building relationships based on mutual respect and trust, learning from the mistakes and pain of the past. In the quiet moments, Emily's family found small ways to celebrate her life. Her younger brother, who had been just a child when she passed, grew up carrying her memory as a guiding light. He became a lawyer, dedicating his career to fighting for victims of domestic violence, ensuring that justice was served for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Every year, on the anniversary of Emily's passing, the town held a community event called Emily's Light. Families, friends, and neighbors gathered at the creek, each holding a lantern. One by one, they released the lanterns into the sky, their soft glow illuminating the darkness. As the lights drifted higher, the crowd fell silent, the moment filled with reflection, unity, and hope. For Emily's mother, it was bittersweet. Watching the lights ascend reminded her of the life her daughter might have had. But it also reminded her of the lives Emily's story had saved. On the 20th anniversary of her passing, a local journalist published a book titled Ripple Effect, The Legacy of Emily's Story. The book chronicled not just the tragedy, but the immense impact Emily had on the world. It was a bestseller, with proceeds donated to the nonprofit that bore Emily's name. Her story reached far beyond the small town, inspiring communities across the country to take action against domestic violence. Even as time continued its relentless march, the creek remained a sacred place. Its waters flowed endlessly, carrying whispers of the past and the hope of a brighter future. And though Emily was no longer there in person, her spirit lingered in every corner of the town. In the laughter of children playing by the tree, in the voices of survivors who found the strength to speak out, and in the hearts of those who vowed never to let her light fade. Emily's life had been stolen, but her legacy was unshakable. She had become a symbol of love, strength, and the enduring power of memory. And so, the town carried her with them, forever etched into their souls. Her story was no longer just a tale of sorrow. It was a story of transformation, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, light can always be found. As generations passed, Emily's story became more than just a memory. It became a cornerstone of the town's identity. The creek, once a place of unspeakable tragedy, was now a site of learning, healing, and unity. The area around it had been transformed into a memorial park, complete with walking trails, a reflection pond, and a small pavilion for community events. Each year, schools brought students there to hear Emily's story, shared by her family and advocates. It wasn't told as a tale of despair, but as a call to action, a powerful reminder of the choices we make and their consequences. For Emily's family, these visits were moments of both pride and sorrow. Her mother, now older but still fiercely devoted to her daughter's legacy, often stood before the students. With her voice steady but her eyes shimmering, she would say, "Emily's story isn't just about loss. It's about what we do with the time we're given. It's about love and the strength to fight for what's right." As the world beyond the town changed, Emily's Park became a destination for those seeking solace. Survivors of abuse traveled from miles away to leave messages on a growing wall near Emily's tree. The messages were etched into tiles, each telling a story of pain, survival, and renewal. Some tiles bore simple phrases. Asterisk, "I left because of you." Asterisk. Others held longer stories, written by shaking hands that found strength in the act of sharing. Emily's brother, now a renowned advocate, often visited the park to read these stories. He would run his fingers over the words, imagining the courage it took for each person to put their experiences into the world. His work had taken him across the globe, yet he always returned home to the creek where his sister's light continued to guide him. On what would have been Emily's 50th birthday, the town held its largest vigil yet. Thousands gathered from near and far, the park aglow with lanterns, candles, and the quiet hum of remembrance. As the crowd stood in silence, Emily's niece, a girl with the same bright eyes and warm smile, stepped forward to speak. She held a photo of Emily, worn at the edges from years of being carried in her grandmother's purse. "My Aunt Emily didn't get to live the life she deserved," the girl began, her voice steady despite her young age. "But her story lives in all of us. She's the reason people like me know what love is supposed to look like. She's the reason we're here, standing together, making sure no one ever feels alone." The words hung in the air, powerful and raw. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers rising like a wave, filling the park with hope and solidarity. As the evening faded into night, the lanterns were released into the sky once more. They drifted upward, their lights scattering like stars, each one carrying a wish, a promise, a memory. And as the town watched the lanterns disappear into the vast expanse, they knew one thing for certain. Emily would never be forgotten. Her story had become more than a tragedy. It had become a beacon, shining brightly, forever illuminating the path toward love, justice, and compassion. Even as the lanterns disappeared into the night sky, the feeling of unity lingered, wrapping the town in a profound sense of purpose. Emily's legacy had grown into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Her story had transcended the boundaries of the town, becoming a symbol for movements around the world advocating for love, respect, and safety in relationships. The nonprofit founded in her name expanded its reach, opening chapters in cities across the country. Workshops, helplines, and community outreach programs now carried her name, ensuring that no one would face the darkness of abuse alone. Emily's tree, now a global icon of resilience, began appearing in murals, artworks, and social media campaigns. Artists from different cultures painted their interpretations of the tree, blending its image with their own symbols of hope and strength. Everywhere it appeared, it reminded people of the enduring power of one person's story to ignite change. Back in the town, the creek became a sanctuary. The park's visitors came not just to mourn, but to celebrate. Couples exchanged vows under Emily's tree, promising to build lives filled with kindness and respect. Survivors held reunions there, gathering to share their journeys of healing and growth. Emily's family, though forever marked by their loss, found peace in the love that continued to bloom in her name. Her mother, now in her twilight years, often sat quietly by the water, her heart heavy yet full. She would listen to the sound of the creek flowing over the rocks, imagining Emily's laughter carried in its melody. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and lavender, her mother wrote her final letter to Emily. "Dear Emily," she began, her hand steady despite the tears brimming in her eyes. "You are everywhere now. in the leaves that dance in the wind, in the faces of those who find strength because of you, in the hearts of everyone who has learned to love better, to fight harder, to live kinder. She paused, watching the sunlight shimmer on the water, then continued. I miss you every single day, but I see you in everything. And because of you, the world is a little brighter, a little safer, and a lot more loving. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it to her chest before tucking it into the roots of Emily's tree. The years continued to roll on, but Emily's presence never faded. The town became a beacon for those seeking hope, a place where tragedy had been transformed into an unstoppable force for good. And as the creek flowed endlessly, its waters carried a message for all who came to listen. A message of love, of courage, and of the unshakable power of memory to inspire change. Emily's story would never be just a chapter in the past. It was a living legacy, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, light could break through and shine forever. As time wore on, Emily's story continued to evolve, weaving itself into the very fabric of the town and beyond. It was no longer just a memory of loss, but a rallying cry that echoed through classrooms, social media platforms, and community gatherings. The foundation in her name worked tirelessly to develop new programs, reaching those who might never have found help otherwise. Educational campaigns spread awareness in places where domestic violence had previously been taboo, offering resources to those too afraid to speak up. Emily's story wasn't confined to textbooks or websites. It was shared in heartfelt conversations, in the whispers of parents talking to their children about healthy relationships, in the strong voices of survivors who refused to be silenced. The younger generation, growing up knowing the impact of Emily's legacy, became the changemakers of the future. Schools began incorporating more robust curriculums on emotional intelligence, teaching students to recognize the signs of unhealthy relationships early on. Teenagers who once might have stayed in silence were now empowered to speak, to seek help, and to break the cycle of violence before it began. Emily's tree became a gathering place for new generations. Children who had never met her, but understood her story and carried it forward with reverence. Every year, a new class of high school seniors would visit the tree, leaving handwritten notes of their promises to live lives of respect, kindness, and care for one another. And as the tree grew, its branches thick and strong, so did the movement that Emily had unintentionally started. The town, once defined by a tragedy, now stood as a symbol of healing and transformation. Even the surrounding communities, inspired by what had been built in Emily's name, began to take action, starting their own initiatives and spreading the message of love and safety. Her name, once synonymous with pain, had become synonymous with progress, an emblem of hope and redemption. Emily's mother, who had spent so many years in the shadow of grief, now stood tall as one of the leading advocates in the country. Her voice, once trembling with sorrow, now rang out strong and unwavering in every speech, every interview, every conversation. She knew, deep in her heart, that her daughter had sparked something far greater than any tragedy. It was a movement, a tidal wave of compassion and understanding that could not be stopped. And as she stood by the creek one last time, her gaze falling on the flowing water, she felt a deep sense of peace. "Emily," she whispered softly, her voice steady and full of pride, "your light is still shining. I promise you it always will." The wind stirred the leaves above her, and in that moment, it felt as though the world itself was listening. Emily's story had become a part of the town, a part of history, and her light would never fade. It would continue to shine, as bright as ever, in the hearts of all who remembered her. As the years continued to pass, Emily's legacy only grew stronger, a lasting influence that spanned generations. Her mother, now an elder in the community, often found solace in quiet moments by the creek, where Emily's spirit seemed to whisper through the rustling leaves. The foundation that had started small had expanded to a global platform, connecting with thousands of organizations around the world, all united by the same mission. Emily's story, though born from a place of deep sorrow, had rippled outward, inspiring a global conversation about the importance of respect, consent, and emotional health. Her mother often received letters from people around the world, each one telling a different story about how Emily's life had impacted them, how it had sparked the courage to leave an abusive relationship, to speak out against injustice, or to help someone in need. One letter, written in a different language, was translated for her. Asterisk, I was in an abusive marriage for years. I had no idea how to leave. But then I read about Emily's story, and I realized I wasn't alone. I found the strength to walk away. Thank you for sharing her light. Asterisk, these letters, each one heartfelt and deeply personal, filled Emily's mother with both sorrow and gratitude. For every life Emily had touched, she had helped create a ripple of change, one that would continue long after her. At the town's annual event, Emily's Light, the tradition continued, growing with each passing year. Families, friends, and strangers would gather by the creek, lighting candles in her memory, their faces illuminated by the soft glow. Each person there carried with them a piece of Emily, a promise to live with kindness, to never accept abuse, and to help those who couldn't help themselves. The young people who had grown up hearing Emily's story now became the leaders of the event, taking on the responsibility of ensuring that her legacy remained vibrant and relevant. And though the faces at the creek would change over time, one thing remained constant: the unwavering dedication to keeping Emily's memory alive, not just through remembrance, but through action. Her name was spoken with reverence, not as a tragic figure, but as a symbol of resilience, of how one person's life could create an undeniable impact on the world. In her small hometown, where Emily had once laughed and dreamed, the community now carried forward the torch she had lit, their hearts forever marked by her story. And as the years turned into decades, Emily's light never dimmed. It was a light that, no matter how dark the world seemed, continued to shine, always reminding everyone who encountered it of the power of love, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the enduring legacy of one brave girl who, though gone too soon, had changed everything. As decades passed, the town became a place known far and wide, not just for the tragedy that had once defined it, but for the remarkable transformation that followed. The town's quiet streets, lined with homes that had once been filled with sorrow, now echoed with the laughter of children who had grown up in a community built on love, respect, and resilience. Emily's story had sparked more than just change. It had ignited a revolution of awareness that rippled across the country and around the world. Her story was now included in textbooks as a poignant example of how a single act of kindness could ripple outward, inspiring monumental change. Nonprofits across the globe had adopted Emily's Foundation as a model for their own initiatives. And every year, on the anniversary of her passing, a new generation of leaders gathered at Emily's tree to reflect, share, and renew their commitment to ending abuse and violence. Emily's mother, now in her 90s, had become a revered figure in advocacy circles, her voice still strong, still pushing forward the cause her daughter had unknowingly started. She spoke not just of Emily, but of the countless lives that had been touched by her memory. Her work, though born out of grief, had blossomed into a movement that promised no one would ever have to suffer in silence again. And so, with each passing year, the town and the world grew closer to the ideal that Emily had inspired, a world where love was defined by care, mutual respect, and the unshakable bond of trust. The creek where Emily had once been left to die had now become a sanctuary for healing. Every spring, when the first flowers bloomed along its banks, the community gathered to celebrate not just Emily's life, but the lives of those who had been saved, who had found the courage to rise above their circumstances and build a better future. The last time Emily's mother visited the creek, the town had grown beyond what she could have imagined. The small, quiet community where she had once mourned had turned into a place of global significance. Standing there by the flowing water, she closed her eyes and whispered one final prayer for her daughter. Asterisk, Emily, you were taken from us too soon. But look at what you've created. You've touched the world, my love. Your light will never fade. Asterisk. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its golden rays over the creek, it felt as though the world had stopped just for a moment. A moment of peace, a moment of grace, where Emily's light, though no longer shining in the form of her bright smile, continued to guide the hearts of everyone who knew her story. Her legacy was no longer just a memory. It was a living, breathing force that would continue to grow, to inspire, and to remind the world of the power one person, one story could have. Emily, in her absence, had become a beacon of hope, and the town, forever marked by her life, carried that light into the future, ensuring that no one would ever forget what it meant to love, to protect, and to fight for justice. As the years continued to pass, the town had transformed into a place of refuge for those seeking solace, guidance, and inspiration. The legacy of Emily's life and the community's response had become a living testament to the power of resilience. The foundation in her name had created a global network of support systems, and it was no longer just about one girl's story. It had become the story of countless others who had found the courage to break free from the cycle of abuse. Emily's tree, now towering with strength and beauty, stood proudly in the heart of the town, its roots deeply intertwined with the very essence of its history. It was a symbol of hope, of how something so small, so fragile, could grow into something unshakable and everlasting. Her mother, with the weight of a life lived in service to her daughter's memory, continued to meet with families and survivors, always listening, always offering her strength. And in each conversation, she found herself more amazed by how Emily's light had reached corners of the world she had never imagined. In every country, in every culture, the lessons of her life resonated, inspiring people to act, to create safe spaces, to foster kindness, and to help those who needed it the most. One year, a documentary about Emily's story was released, bringing her legacy to an even wider audience. The film depicted not only her tragic end, but the powerful ripple effect that had ensued, portraying the faces of survivors, activists, and everyday people whose lives had been changed because of Emily's impact. The documentary won awards, but more importantly, it sparked a global conversation about the importance of early intervention, prevention, and education. It was broadcasted in schools, community centers, and social media platforms worldwide, igniting discussions and creating a wave of action that was felt across borders. As the years stretched on, Emily's mother, now in her late 90s, could finally rest in the knowledge that her daughter's legacy was a force that would never be silenced. Her family, who had once been bound by the weight of grief, had now found healing through the work they had done in Emily's name. Her younger brother, who had once been too young to understand the magnitude of their loss, had become a prominent advocate, working tirelessly to continue the fight Emily had unknowingly begun. And Emily's niece, now an adult, had taken on the role of spokesperson for the foundation, sharing her aunt's story with pride, her voice unwavering and strong. On the 50th anniversary of Emily's passing, the town held its most significant celebration yet. It wasn't just a remembrance of the tragedy, but a celebration of the extraordinary transformation that had taken place, of the lives that had been saved, of the countless stories of resilience, and of the enduring legacy that Emily had left behind. At the ceremony, the town's mayor spoke. Asterisk, Emily's story is not just one of pain, but one of hope. A hope that has spread across the world and touched every corner of humanity. She will never be forgotten. Her light will always shine, guiding us toward a future where love is never tainted by fear. Asterisk, the crowd gathered at Emily's tree, each person reflecting on how far they had come, and how far they still had to go. As lanterns were once again released into the sky, a soft breeze stirred the branches above them, carrying with it the whisper of Emily's spirit. And for a moment, just a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, honoring the light of one remarkable girl whose story would never fade. It would live on, forever, in the hearts of those who remembered, in the lives of those who had been touched, and in the promise that one person's light can indeed change the world As the lanterns floated upward, their warm glow reflected in the eyes of those gathered, their hearts united in a shared commitment to honor Emily's legacy. The town, once known for its sorrow, had become a beacon of transformation. And as the years stretched on, Emily's story continued to inspire new generations, teaching them the importance of kindness, respect, and standing up for one another. The ripple of her impact spread beyond the town's borders, into cities and communities far and wide. Every year, on the anniversary of her passing, the global network of Emily's Foundation grew stronger, with new programs, new initiatives, and new voices joining the movement. From shelters to schools, from hospitals to local community centers, Emily's teachings were integrated into the fabric of society. Her story was no longer just a painful memory. It had become a guiding light, an enduring source of strength for those who needed it most. At the heart of it all remained Emily's family, whose dedication never wavered. Emily's mother, though frail with age, still spoke at events, her voice a soft but powerful reminder of the importance of love and justice. Her brother, now a father himself, took great pride in continuing the fight for safe and healthy relationships, knowing that the work they did in Emily's name was changing lives. And Emily's niece, the young girl who had once stood by her mother's side at vigils, now led the foundation with poise, passion, and a deep sense of responsibility. Together, they knew that Emily's light would never fade. On the final day of Emily's 50th anniversary event, as the lanterns gently settled onto the earth below, the family gathered by Emily's tree, each of them reflecting on how far they had come. The town stood behind them, its streets no longer weighed down by grief, but filled with the promise of a brighter future. And as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park, Emily's mother closed her eyes one last time by the creek. A single tear fell from her eye, but it was not a tear of sorrow. It was a tear of peace. For Emily had not only left behind a legacy of hope and change, she had left behind a world that was forever better because she had lived. As the evening drew to a close, the final lanterns settled softly in the grass, their light still flickering like the promise of hope. The community gathered in quiet reverence, each person holding the memory of Emily close to their hearts. The air was thick with emotion, but it was the kind of emotion that was both bittersweet and beautiful, a recognition of how far they had come and how much they had accomplished. Emily's mother, standing beside the tree, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She looked at her family, the faces of those who had carried her daughter's legacy, and smiled through the tears that had once come so easily. Her life had been a long journey of pain and healing, of loss and love. But now, standing by the creek, she knew that her daughter's spirit would forever echo in the hearts of those who had fought for change in her name. And as she glanced around at the gathered crowd, it was clear, Emily had not just changed the town, she had changed the world. Her story was no longer confined to the pages of history books. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of one voice, one life, to spark a movement that could not be extinguished. The mayor, who had spoken earlier, stood with a sense of pride as he addressed the crowd one last time. Asterisk, as we close this chapter tonight, let us remember that the light we see in the sky and in each other's eyes is a gift Emily gave us. Her legacy will continue for generations, and it is our responsibility to keep that flame alive. Asterisk. With those words, the crowd began to disperse, but no one truly left. They lingered, reflecting on the life of a young girl who had been taken too soon, but whose impact would never fade. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emily's mother placed her hand on the trunk of Emily's tree. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. It wasn't just the end of an anniversary. It was the culmination of a lifetime of work, of grief, of hope. Her daughter had not been forgotten, and neither would the work they had started. As she turned to walk back toward her family, the light from the lanterns glistened in her eyes, and she knew with certainty that Emily's spirit would always be with them, guiding them in their continued fight for justice and love. The community walked away from the creek, their hearts full of resolve. They knew that the future, though uncertain, would forever be shaped by Emily's light. And with each step, they carried her memory forward. Through every act of kindness, through every voice raised in support of others, through every person who would live by the lessons she had unknowingly taught. Emily's legacy would never be extinguished. It would burn brightly forever, a beacon for a world that had been forever changed by her life the years past. And the town, once defined by tragedy, became a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Emily's legacy, built on a foundation of compassion, justice, and healing, had spread far beyond the small community where she had lived. As the final chapter of Emily's story unfolded, there was a profound sense of peace, not only for her family, but for everyone who had been touched by her life. The darkness of that fateful day, when her life was stolen, no longer held sway over the town. Instead, it was the light of her impact that illuminated their path forward. Emily's mother, now in her final years, reflected often on the incredible journey they had all undertaken. What had begun as a raw and unthinkable tragedy had transformed into a global movement, a movement that had saved lives, given hope, and inspired countless people to fight for what was right. Her work was done, but the torch she had carried so long would continue to burn brightly. Emily's niece, now the leader of the foundation, stood by her side at the annual gathering by the creek, where it all began. The community had gathered once more, this time not for a solemn remembrance, but to celebrate the extraordinary legacy they had built together. Her niece spoke to the crowd, her voice steady and strong. Asterisk, what we've built here is more than just a foundation. It's a promise that Emily's light will never fade, that the lessons of her life will continue to guide us, and that we will never stop fighting for a world where love is never tainted by fear. Asterisk, as the crowd applauded, the wind gently stirred the leaves of the great tree, as if Emily herself was watching over them, her spirit forever intertwined with the community she had helped transform. The lanterns, released into the sky one last time, shimmered like stars as they ascended, carrying with them the collective hope of all who had come to honor Emily. The final moment felt timeless, for though Emily was gone, her influence would never fade. And so, the town, now thriving and full of life, moved forward, forever carrying her story in their hearts. The world, forever changed by the love, strength, and courage of one young girl, was better because of her. Her light would endure, a beacon of hope for generations to come.